Welcome back. In the previous lecture, we talked about generating new code with Bard. Let's take a look at what Bard can really do with existing code. I think this is where Bard really tends to shine. Let's check it out. Okay, here I am inside of Google Bard, and I want to show you two use cases for working with existing code sets with Bard. A really common use case is to have Bard help you debug something. So for example, here I have an example, a Python function that sums up two numbers, but I'm receiving this type error because I'm actually trying to add in an integer with a string, which is not allowed in Python. So what I could do is copy my error code and ask Bard to help me out here. So we'll say, help me solve this error. And then often a good idea is to add in some new lines. You can use Shift Enter to that to separate out your prompt from the error code. New lines is a great way for prompt engineers to just figure out, okay, what is what I'm asking Bard versus the context for Bard to understand. So we'll go ahead and ask it to help me solve this error, and hopefully it should figure out that I shouldn't be adding an integer with a string in Python, and it should be able to automatically recognize. And there it is. So it's adding an integer to a string in Python that's not compatible, and it says you can either convert the string to an integer. So you notice it adds in a check there, only add two integers together, another type of check there, and basically that will solve my problem. So I could go back and update my function to have this. So that's great. Another use case that I tend to use a lot for Google Bard is often when you're coding, you're just kind of in the mood to code, you're not really in the mood to document. And a really great use case for Bard and large language models in general is once you have existing code, you may need to add a documentation string to it. And you can do that easily with Bard by just copying and pasting your code. And I would recommend starting a new chat per like task or idea thread. And we can say, please create a doc string or documentation string or additional documentation for the Python code below. Colon, I'll do Shift Enter just to separate out my Python code versus my actual prompt task. I don't want it to get confused and think this is actually part of the code. I'll go ahead and run this, and if everything works out well, then I should get a brand new code block with a nice doc string. So that's kind of the first thing that's really common to use. So here is the doc string, but it didn't actually put it into the code. So what I can do is I can regenerate the draft, or I can edit this to say, please create a doc string for the Python code below, and return the updated Python function with the doc string inside. So it's really up to you what you prefer. If you just wanted the doc string, I could have copied and pasted that back here underneath my function, or I could just now copy paste everything, and now it has this really nice doc string here as well. And you can see the 3 lines of code here have not been changed. And I can continue on the conversation by saying, please add some try except statements to catch potential errors. So another great use case for Bard is to help you write test cases or just help you prevent further debugging by adding try except statements. So you can see here, it's going to say, hey, try this, except maybe the file's not found. It went ahead and added an exception there. Or if there's empty data, or if there's a parsing error, or if there's an exception, an unexpected exception, etc. So there's lots of use cases for existing code with Bard. Some of my favorites are adding in a doc string, as well as creating try except statements, or the equivalent for your language, to help you make the code more robust. And then finally, you can add, create a test case using, whatever your favorite library is. So we can say something like using unit test for this Python function. And again, this will depend on what language you're working with, but automating test case creation is a great tool. Of course, you always want to double check the work of Bard and make sure it actually runs in order to make sure everything's working as expected. Okay, so here it is. Here are my test cases, and that's all working, matching up. And you can see in just a few seconds, I've made my current work a lot better by leveraging the Gemini model behind Bard. Okay, now I did mention that you do want to actually run this code and make sure it works. much more than the text prompts, code prompts tend to lean more towards potential hallucinations. For example, it sometimes won't know the exact method calls available on a library. Maybe it will say something like .histogram plot instead of .histplot, because maybe it read older documentation and the documentation has been updated and the library's been updated. In that case, it's really important to understand hallucinations overall as a concept for large language models. So let's cover that in the next lecture.